What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Inside Inter Miami. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, joined as always by our Inter Miami beat writer, Michelle Kaufman. And we are back on the roller coaster that has become this season for Inter Miami, going from the highest of highs, coming back. They called it the comeback game, and it proved to be true. They beat LAFC, even though they dug themselves an even bigger hole at the beginning of that game, but they got the goals necessary and advanced in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, only to then for the roller coaster to come down again and go into another disappointing draw on the road against the Chicago Fire, which needed some heroics from goalkeeper Oscar Ustari just to make sure it was a draw and not a loss. So we'll talk about both outcomes a little bit in this show. We'll go over Ustari's performance and also the fact that Messi played once again in both games, including finally playing at Soldier Field. The fans in Chicago had been waiting for that for a long time. Record crowd at the famed Soldier Field for that matchup. Javier Mascherano will have some footage of him talking about where this team stands as they're playing this continually busy schedule between the Champions Cup and MLS League play. Miami remains unbeaten when it comes to league play, but they're slipping a little bit in the standings, even though we're still in the early half of the season overall. But the team kind of losing its grip on the top tier for the moment, anyway, and has a tough road coming up in the next couple of games on the road, taking on the always mighty Columbus Crew in a game that will be played at another NFL stadium, at the Cleveland Browns Stadium, since 67,000 are expected as the two remaining teams that are still unbeaten in the league clash. And then right after that, we talked about it, I think a week ago, the Vancouver trip has materialized, and that's the big 7-hour flight off to Vancouver to take on the Western Conference leading Vancouver Whitecaps. So we will go over all of that, digest all of that, and then talk a little bit about some of the personnel moves that the team made last week concerning Julian Gressel, Robert Taylor. And Messi bought some units in a condo for that opens in 2028. So, hey, maybe he's here for the long haul. But anyway, let's start with this thriller of a game in which Inter Miami falls behind 1-0. The hole gets even deeper, but they dig their way out of it, Michelle, and they find the way. They get the 3 goals necessary, and on to Canada, on to Vancouver.
Well, they found a way because Lionel Messi is on this team and he scored 2 goals. He scored
That's usually the
they
way.
went down. Yeah, the magician came out with a few tricks out of his hat. Uh and they went down 1-0. At that moment, they're down 2-0 aggregate score, and I'm thinking, and not only me, everyone I think is thinking there's no way they're not going to score 3 unanswered goals, because if you remember all the complicated math, they had to win by 2 goals. It wasn't just win, they had to win by 2 goals to advance because they came in at a 1-0 deficit against LAFC. So they have to score 3 unanswered goals. What are the odds of that happening? It's pretty rare to score 3 unanswered goals, but Lionel Messi comes out and scores the equalizer, and gives them hope heading into halftime. It's like, okay, well, Messi scored. They got a little lift of momentum. The fans had reason to believe, at least, okay, they have to score 2 more now, 2 more. And then Noah Allen on a fluky goal that it seemed like it was a pass to Fede Redondo. It basically flew through Fede Redondo's hair as he was jumping. The ball went through his hair. It really never even touched his head. It
Right.
skimmed his hair and bounced into the goal to make it 2-0, to make it 2-1.
I'm not even
So
sure what you'd
now they're
call that.
ahead 2-1.
I'm
Huh?
not even, I'm not even sure
Yeah.
what you'd call that. And it's not really a header. A hair? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
A
weird.
hairer.
Yeah.
A hairer. Anyway, it was debatable whether they were going to give that goal to Noah Allen or give it to Fede Redondo. Anyway, I give it to Noah Allen. So so they're up 2-1. So they're up 2-1, but that still wasn't good enough. They had to score again and not allow another goal. And sure enough, who else but the GOAT, Lionel Messi, scores the third goal, and Ustari played very well at the end. He stopped a couple of shots at the very end that would have changed everything.
And maybe this is blurring for me, but they didn't have a goal taken off too. Either I think it was an offside on top of that, so it could have been at
They
4.
had yeah, they had another goal taken away, and then Messi scored on a PK on a free kick, um, and so because he
Oh,
got
you're right,
knocked
PK.
down, and then the guy, huh?
I think it was a PK. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you were right. There
it
was
was
a
a
PK.
PK. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a PK, and then the guy who knocked into him in the box, that same player later in the game, very late in the game, Messi was running, 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 sprinting down the field with the ball, and he got clocked by that guy. And then a melee broke out. There was like a little fracas going on between the two teams. It was kind of ugly for a few minutes there. There was a lot of tension, obviously, from both teams scrapping around at the very end in the final few minutes. Messi was on the ground. Everyone got nervous for a few minutes, but then he got up. And Ustari made 2 saves at the end on some last chance efforts by LAFC that would have changed everything and would have knocked them out. So, you know, the atmosphere was unbelievable. It was one of the best atmospheres that I've seen in an Inter Miami game. I mean, there was just so much tension. And at the beginning, it was kind of quiet. When LAFC went up, it was a little bit quiet. But after Messi scored that equalizing goal to go into halftime, I think everyone started to believe maybe there's a chance. And the fans were really into it in the second half. And so was the team. They played with a lot of fire. They played with a lot of fire. All these guys that are in their mid to late 30s, and they've had a very busy schedule, but they really wanted this. And Javier Mascherano said afterward, I just believe that in this case, both teams were playing, to win and everything. But I think our team wanted it more. Our team wanted to be in the semifinals more. He felt that they were just hungrier. And so they end up advancing. And we're going to talk later about Vancouver, but that is going to be a very, very, very tough series. But they did advance. They're in the semifinals, which is more than they had ever done before.
And I know this is way down the road, but an LAFC would have some work to do because in the standings they're 4 wins and 4 losses right now. But a little bit of bad blood between these teams. If that were to happen down the road, these teams encounter each other once again. It'd be interesting to see after some of the we had and then in the first game, remember the player that they felt should have been red carded potentially
Red card,
was
there was a
not.
yellow. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of
There's no love
little
lost. I
yeah
don't think there's any love lost between Miami and LA, and it's the two glamour
yeah
cities. Let's admit
that's
it.
right.
Miami against LA. It's the two glamour cities with the movie stars and the celebrity fans and all that. And it's becoming a good rivalry for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. But then the turnaround is this team with their roller coaster that they're on right now. They go from the disappointing draw against Toronto to this emotional high of winning this game, and then turn around, go to Chicago, and it felt like both sides really. It felt like it was a snoozer of a first half, especially, and then the last few minutes, both teams wake up. There's a flurry of chances on both sides, but neither hits the mark. I think there were a couple of shots that hit the post even, and Ustari makes the save of the game. I think it was about like a minute or two left, makes a diving stop that keeps it from being a loss at least. But 1 point instead of 3, and here's Inter Miami now falling from the top of the Eastern Conference. Not dramatically. Again, it's still very early in the season, but losing some ground to these teams where now it puts more of an onus on this Columbus game coming up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game again. The workload is one of the things that we keep bringing up, and Javier Mascherano is going to talk about it here in a minute on video clip. But a lot of us were surprised. Remember that they all played against Toronto. We thought, oh, they're going to rest Messi for the LAFC game. They're going to rest, all these guys. Busquets will play, but the other ones won't play. Well, everybody played, and then they played against LA, and LA was a very, very fatiguing game mentally and physically. It was a very draining game for that team, emotionally and physically. They worked their butts off, and they're just the emotions, like you said. When they won that game, the celebration was almost like they had won the MLS Cup. I mean, it was all they've done is advance to the semifinal, but it showed how much they wanted it and how much was at stake. by how they celebrated. That's how you can tell how much a team wants something. The way they celebrated that win over LAFC was as if they had won some sort of trophy. They
Yeah.
still are, they have not won a trophy. They're far from winning this trophy still. But it took out so much energy. And then I asked Mascherano before the Chicago game, is there anything left in the tank? Does this team have enough gas in the tank to go to Chicago now? And he just said that we're going to put out our best 11. We're going to put out our best 11. These guys can play. But maybe they were a little bit flat. Maybe they were a little bit flat going to Chicago, even though it was a crowd of 62,000, which was a record for Chicago. They had broken the record initially 2 years ago, 61,000 awaiting Messi. They sold 61,000 tickets like in June of that year. And then he ended up not playing in 23. He was injured. Then in 24, they sold 55,000 tickets with the caveat with the ticket sale, they told the fans the second time, if Messi doesn't play, you will get a credit and you will get some other perks. So they set up their fans the second year, and once again, he was a no-show last year. So 2 years in a row, Chicago sells it plus 55,000 tickets, and Messi doesn't show. This year, 62,300, an all-time record for the Chicago Fire, and Messi did show up. The third time was the charm. He did show up, and he played the full game, took 4 shots, but none of them went in. Took 4 shots, none of them went in. No one else scored either. And, really the only reason that they came out of that with 1 point was that Oscar Ustari had 7 saves. He had 7 saves, which, saved the day and gave them a point. But, this game, they really did struggle, and they have been struggling a little bit since the Toronto game. The Toronto defense, they clogged the middle. They made it very difficult for the midfielders to get the ball to Messi and to Suarez. And that showed again against LA, and it showed again against Chicago. So, the other teams are starting to figure out some strategies of how to keep the middle of the field clogged up and congested. And, you saw in this game that Telesco Segovia struggled, and Benja struggled, and Redondo struggled in the middle. It was difficult for them to get comfortable.
Yeah, it seems like the film is out there on this team, and the strategy is starting to get passed around the league on how to maybe thwart this attack a little bit and kind of slow them down. But like you said, let's hear from Javier Mascherano about the workload and everything else with this team and the state that they're in right now as they prepare for
We're
more.
Gonna hear from Ustari first.
But let's hear from Ustari first on the great saves, including, I'm telling you, that diving stop he made at the end was tremendous on a breakaway, pretty much to save the game.
Yo siempre digo que es importante que la gente disfrute de un jugador como Leo. Ojalá todo el mundo tenga la posibilidad de ver a este chico que es increíble dentro de una cancha, porque nosotros tenemos la suerte de conocerlo como persona y bueno, a veces naturalizamos eso. Pero sé que Leo a donde va generalmente lo tratan bien, lo admiran mucho, y nosotros también nos ponemos a veces en el lugar de la gente y nos sentimos igual que la gente.
¿Cómo es como persona?
Bien. Es un gran amigo de hace años y es lo más normal, aunque es difícil de escuchar eso una persona así, pero es lo más normal.
So that's a story talking about Messi. He was asked about the fact that 62,000 fans were there, and what is he like? What's he like in real life? What's it like to be his teammate? And of course, Ustari is a longtime friend of his. They played together on the Argentina youth national teams. They've known each other for a long time. Ustari's 38 years old. Leo Messi is about to turn 38 years old. So they go way, way back. And what he said was, it's a privilege for every fan should have a chance to see this player up close and to see him in person, because he really is something special. And every fan of the sport should have an opportunity to see him play because he's that special. And then he said, for me, as a teammate, it's to come back and get to play with him is amazing, but he's a very normal person away from the field. And he said, I know that may seem unusual to say that about a figure like that who's such a big icon, but he really is very normal as a human being, that he's just being with him is just like being with anyone else, even though that may seem strange to say for someone who's as big of an icon as he is. But yeah, it was that game. Messi did what he could, but could not score. And Ustari, his friend, is the reason. And by the way, the battle between Ustari and Drake, once again, are you going to take out a hot keeper? These things with goalkeepers is when they're hot, they're hot. When they're playing well, so Drake was on the bench. He traveled for that game, but the game that Ustari had with 7 saves, he really is earning his minutes. So it's going to be a battle between those two keepers.
I think it's safe to say he's goalie number 1 right now, and that Drake, for now, I mean, whether it's easing him back into the flow of it or whatnot, but Ustari also playing tremendously. He's as they say in football, QB1. He's GK1 for now, for sure, because you can't take this guy out. I mean, look how he's winning you. He's saving you. He's not winning. I can win the games, but he's saving you from defeats right now. And even in that, the performances he's had, just going back to the beginning of the season, have been really good. So I think that's settled for the moment, for the time being, until something happens, if something happens.
Yeah, and they do have a very busy schedule, which we're going to talk right now about with Javier Mascherano about managing the roster. How does he make the decision to manage the roster, and should these stars be playing every single game, or will it be too much, or is it not? Are they used to this? He had said before, look, these guys, the 4 big ones, are used to playing every 3 or 4 days, but then he also complains that they play every 3 or 4, not complains, but says, he said, let's not forget, he said in the post game at Chicago that of course he would want to win, but at least they came out with a tie and they avoided a loss. He said it's very important to avoid a loss. And then he said, let's not forget that most of the other teams have 1 game a week, and that's it. And our team is playing every 3 or 4 days for the past 2 months, which is true. The teams, Miami and Vancouver have been playing every 3 or 4 days for the last 2 months, pretty much, with this Champions Cup stuck in the middle of everything. Whereas these other teams, Chicago Fire, had the entire week to prepare for that big game in front of the big crowd. And Greg Berhalter had a full week to prepare a game plan, and the players had all week to gear themselves up for that game. This team, not to make excuses, but an explanation of why they may have come out flat, is that Wednesday night, they were playing a game that was almost like a final that we just talked about, all the energy they expended. Thursday, they had the day off to relax from that and to rest. They practiced on Friday, and then they travel and they play on Sunday. So it has been a grind. It's been a grind for this team. So let's see what Javier Mascherano has to say, right, about that.
Siempre hablamos de lo mismo. Si están bien, van a jugar. Esto es así, y cuando digo estar bien, es estar bien desde lo físico, desde lo mental, desde estar al 100%. Y si no, bueno, alguno descansará, esto es así, pero la idea nuestra es poner lo mejor que tenemos, porque lo dije el otro día también cuando jugábamos contra Toronto, y que entendí que Michel un poco ahí se quejaba de que habíamos jugado con los 4 grandes, pero es así, al final yo entiendo que muchas veces hay que ir manejando los minutos, pero también es importante la dinámica del equipo, que el equipo tenga buenos resultados, que también ellos nos ayudan mucho dentro de lo que es el equipo a liderar a la hora del juego, y bueno, la idea nuestra es esa, es tratar de ir manejando las cargas, pero si están bien, poder utilizarlo lo máximo posible.
I like that coach is a fan of your work and a fan of this show. I can tell you he watches this. He knows exactly what you say at all times. He mentions you
Yes,
by
because
name.
he
Yeah.
mentioned me by name because he said what he said there is, look, my philosophy or our philosophy, he says, as a coaching staff, is if they're fine, they're going to play. If they're well 100% physically and mentally, they are going to play. And he said, I know that there is the issue of trying to balance workload and everything. And he said, but it's the same as the game before Toronto. And then he made a little mention there and he said, I know that Michel, he said, I know Michelle was maybe complaining, and I wasn't complaining, I was questioning playing the 4 big stars against Toronto, which was the worst team in the East. And to play those 4 guys, you are risking injury. They're fortunate that no one came out injured of that game, but they probably now, it turned out I thought that they would have been able to win that game without the big 4. As it turned out, they tied Toronto, so maybe they would not have won that game without the big 4. So who's
I
to
mean,
question? I'm not a coach. He's the coach. He knows better than me. And he said,
yeah, they
he
had 2
said,
goals
listen, I
taken
know
away.
Michelle. Yeah, they did
That's
have
all I'm
2
saying.
taken away. He said, I know Michelle was questioning or whatever, playing the 4 big ones against Toronto. And he said, but our feeling is that we want our best players out there all the time. And he also said that the 4 big, Busquets, Alba, Suarez, and Messi, it's not only their play, but he said they also bring a lot of leadership. He said they bring a lot of leadership when they're on the field. So it isn't just what they're doing with the ball on the field when they play that would be missing when they don't play. It's the leadership that they provide. And if you take out the 4 leaders of the team, then the ship is a little rudderless. They don't have the captain there. They don't have the first mate, the second mate, the third mate. They've lost their leaders. If you pull all 4 of those guys out of a game, they don't have the leadership that they have with those 4. So I do understand that point that he's making, that hey, we can't just sub in and out. Okay, the 4 guys are playing because this is a hard opponent. Okay, the 4 guys are not going to play because this is a weaker opponent. He can't plan his roster that way. He wants to have the leaders on the field, and so his philosophy is play them as much as possible as long as they're healthy.
Yeah, and a rarity for this team right now, having 5 days to rest, recuperate, train, and get ready for the next one. Obviously, a big one at Columbus, but it's still those 5 days in between. They will gladly take them as they face this team coming up right now. Which, if we look at the standings right now, Columbus is right at the top, 18 points, 5-0-3. Yep.
Yes. Right now, the standings are Columbus Crew on top, followed by Charlotte and Cincinnati, and then Miami in 4th place. It's still early, obviously.
Yeah, it's only a 3-point gap.
It's a 3-point gap. We know that the Supporter Shield is not really the ultimate goal anymore, but they are not on top of the table right now. But we actually know from last year that they stayed on top of the table the entire season, and then, were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. So the truth is, right now, the most urgent and most pressing thing is the Champions Cup semifinal that comes next week against Vancouver. However, they don't want to go and embarrass themselves against the Columbus Crew, which is the first place team. These are athletes. They're competitive. Mascherano has said it, and they all say it, that once they get on the field, they want to win every game that they play. They're not going to say, well, we don't care if we beat the Columbus Crew because all that matters is the Vancouver game next week. Athletes don't think that way. You put them on the field with another team facing them, especially the Columbus Crew is a team that the last few years has been on top of the East time and again. It's been one of their biggest rivals in the East. They have an excellent coach. This is also going to be a matchup of Wilfred Nancy, who has been, the nominee for Coach of the Year, an outstanding coach who does not have the big name stars that some of these other teams have, like Miami, and year in and year out, without big stars, and being in a market like Columbus, Ohio, this is not Glamour City, Miami, or LA or New York. Columbus, Ohio, Columbus Crew, without the glitz and the glamour on their roster, they are continually a power in the East, and it's a testament to their coach. Their coach is an excellent coach. He's going to be going up against Mascherano, who is a first-year coach with just now getting his first experience in MLS. And I'm already hearing some little, or seeing on social media, some little complaints already about Mascherano is not adjusting to the other teams when they're clogging the middle. He's not adjusting, and maybe he needs to do this and maybe he needs to do that. So this is going to be a game where his coaching tactics and game day decisions and roster decisions are going to be discussed and analyzed, going up against a coach like Wilfred Nancy. And that team, they lost Cucho Hernandez. Everyone thought, oh, he went to Spain. He's playing in La Liga. What's going to happen? Well, they just signed last week Daniel Gazdag from Philadelphia. One of the top players from Philadelphia just signed last week, just in time for the Miami game. They signed this top player from Philly. It's a team that also defends very well, and they're going to be a handful. This is going to be a difficult game.
Yeah, well, this is the game that a lot of people thought, ourselves included, would have been the Eastern Conference Finals last year, potentially. I mean, remember before, obviously, the disappointing losses on both sides that's flipped everything on its head in the MLS playoffs. But we get to see the treat this season and see if this can build toward that. But then this team again has maybe an extra day because of the travel and the very long flight they're going to have to go to Vancouver. And then they're facing the Western Conference leaders, which you can't take lightly at this point, off to their best start in club history, 6 wins already, 1 draw, only 1 defeat. Brian White scoring 4 goals in a game to have them beat Austin the other day. This team is hot too right now, the Whitecaps, and to go all the way out there, that's gonna be a tough one. And then and then that in itself, that semifinal leg, again with that clogged schedule, they had to move the Dallas game a day ahead, but still you have another league game sandwiched in between these 2 games with Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver is the hottest team right now. In addition to being 6-1-1, Brian White scoring 4 goals, obviously named Player of the Week. They have scored 17 goals and they've allowed 6. They have a plus 11 goal differential right now. Plus 11 goal differential. Miami, by contrast, they've scored 12 goals. They've allowed 6. So they're plus 6. They're at plus 6. Vancouver is at plus 11. The Vancouver team is very, very good, and they are missing. The scary part about this team, about Vancouver, even looking ahead to playoffs later on and potential, if they were to make the final or whatever at the end of the year, Vancouver, just talking about them as a team. First of all, they have a new coach, also a Danish coach, not as well known as Javier Mascherano, but also a first-year coach in this league, a Danish coach, Jesper Sorensen. He's got them off to an amazing start, even though they are missing right now their DP. Ryan Gold is missing for injury, and Canadian left back from the Canadian national team, one of their other top players, Sam, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Sam Adekugbe. Sam Adekugbe is one of their best players, and Ryan, the 2 of their best players, are not playing right now, and they are still 6-1-1, and they have scored 17 goals and allowed 6. They're on a tear right now, and that is who Miami is going to fly 7 hours to play at BC Place in Vancouver, another very large stadium. They're going to have a huge crowd. I assume it's going to be sold out. Also, like the Chicago situation, I don't know if you remember, but last year, Messi did not go to that Vancouver trip, and their fans were angry. Their fans were threatening lawsuits, and the fans, because they had made all these festivities around the game, and their fans were threatening lawsuits and all kinds of stuff because they were mad. So now they are going to presumably get to see Leo Messi play. So it's going to be a great atmosphere in Vancouver for one of the hottest teams in the league right now.
And this
So
is
yeah, Miami is now going out to play the top team in the East on the road, followed by the top team in the West on the road.
And the Whitecaps, that's a league high 17 goals. And that's not even counting the fact that in this Champions Cup, they have 9 goals as well. So 26 goals overall. This is a high scoring team that can get at it. So, Oscar Ustari, the defense in front of him better be ready. They do allow a lot of in cup play. They have allowed a decent amount of goals too, though. So they might be a little bit vulnerable in the counterattack for Inter Miami, but they are coming at them.
Miami's vulnerable, I think, but also Miami's vulnerable on the counterattack.
Agreed. But I'm saying this could be one of those.
It could be a high scoring,
which defense steps up?
But which defense steps up, because they have been vulnerable in transition. Miami has, and I will get on my Yannick Bright high horse here. Yannick Bright needs to be playing next to Sergio Busquets for the defensive part of the midfield, because when they have Redondo or when they have Benja, they are good young players, but Yannick Bright he just pairs up very well with Sergio Busquets, and he is able to cut off a lot of those passes and attacks in transition. And you see it time and again. Miami is vulnerable in transition, and all of a sudden you'll see guys chasing and running to try to catch up. Whereas when Yannick Bright is in there with Busquets, he does seem to get in the way and stop some of those counterattacks. So I am not a coach, and I would never presume to tell Javier Mascherano who to play or who not to play. I never do that. Coaches know better than us by a million times. But just from an observer standpoint, I think that the Busquets-Bright pairing is much better defensively than when they put someone else in those roles.
Very quickly, Julian Gressel and Robert Taylor not on the game roster for that Chicago trip. Anything to that, Michelle? What's going on with them?
Well, I've been asking around some sources. My sources tell me that Robert Taylor is not on the shopping list, that they are keeping Robert Taylor and they like Robert Taylor. That was just, I guess, a tactical decision. Julian Gressel clearly Julian Gressel has not played pretty much this year. This is a guy who makes a lot of money. He's one of the top, I think $900,000 a year. He was a starter last season. He's a guy who was a team leader, was a starter with Atlanta. He was a big star. He came here as a big star. Tata Martino loved him. He had played for him in Atlanta. He obviously does not mesh as well with the plans of Javier Mascherano because he has not really played at all this year. So I have heard that he is being shopped around. I've heard that he may end up back in Atlanta if something works out, that is a place that maybe he would like to be. They loved him there. He enjoyed his time there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Chris Henderson is there, who was in Miami before. So maybe that is a landing spot. The window closes on April 23rd. So we have 1 week, one more week for any type of transactions that are going to happen in MLS. For this window until the summer, it has to be by April 23rd. So if Julian is going to be going somewhere, which I would assume he is, based on the fact that he just doesn't ever come in and hasn't even been on the game roster for a couple of the games this year, it will be by next week that we will know where he's going. But I hear that Atlanta may be a place that would be interested, and that maybe he would be interested to go as well.
Well, one person we know isn't going anywhere is Lionel Messi. We know that, but can that be said in the long-term future? I mean, now he's buying property that isn't even going to be up and built till 2028. I mean, what was up with that?
Yeah, we had a story in the Miami Herald that Lionel Messi just bought 4 units. 4 units. One of them was 7.5 million condo units that are in downtown Miami on Brickell. A really big 80-floor, an 80-story downtown Miami high rise on the water in downtown Miami, and he bought 4 units. And we don't know if the units are actually for he and his family to use, or if they're just being purchased as investments. But the buildings won't even be completed until 2028. So it's 3 more years still. But it is sort of a sign that he is invested, definitely invested financially in Miami. And I think he will be around. I do think that this is sort of a long-term home or second home between here and Argentina. I think Rosario will always be home, but I think Miami could be second home. And I know Barcelona is still a beloved place for him. Those 3 cities, Barcelona, Miami, Rosario, those are his 3 homes. He is investing in Miami, though, investing in buying these properties. He already has a couple of properties. Now he's buying 4 more properties. And the word is that, he has a contract through this year, through 2025, with an option for 26. It is no secret, and Jorge Mas has said many times, we expect and we hope that he will be here to christen our new stadium in 2026 at the start of that season. I could definitely see a scenario where he signs an option for 26 to assure the fans that are going to be purchasing tickets for this new stadium. That they want to sell out that stadium and sell as many season tickets as they can. If the fans know that Lionel Messi will be playing at Miami Freedom Park, that is going to raise sales for those tickets. So I could see a scenario where he does sign for 2026. And then who knows? We don't know how he's going to feel. But let's say we're just going to, make a scenario here, and we don't know. Again, everything can change with one injury, or if he gets tired, if he has a change of heart. But we know how competitive he is. We know he would love to play in a final World Cup in this new second home of his at Miami. It's very convenient. He lives right here. The Argentina national team will be based here, I'm sure. It'll be very convenient for him to play a World Cup here in Miami, and in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So I could even see a scenario where he signs up to play for Inter Miami, plays the first part of the season to stay in shape, plays in the World Cup, and then who knows? Maybe he rides off into the sunset after the World Cup and doesn't complete the season. Or if he's still feeling well, takes a little break after the World Cup and finishes out 2026 and then retires. So, I think it'll be interesting. I think he probably would retire at the end of 2026 or after the World Cup of 26. I don't anticipate that he would retire before 2026. You never know.
Right.
But I think we will see him around a little bit, at least in 2026.
Yeah, maybe he gets
That's
inspired.
my guess. That's just me talking.
Yeah. And I think the same thing. I mean, at the very least through the World Cup. And yeah, maybe depending on where the team is at by that point, if they're on another run, maybe trying to win an MLS Cup again, and any other tournament they're in at that point, maybe he's like stick around and finish it off, and then that's it, and then he gets his goodbye. But the fact that he's sticking around in the city beyond that point, or at least plans to, even if some of his time, that's good. That's good.
Remember that he is part of his deal. The biggest part of his deal, financially, is he has equity in the club. So he becomes a part owner of this club upon retirement.
But it sounds like he's going to be around.
Yes, exactly. The minute he retires from this club, he will become part owner of this club. So he is going to be around. Even if he's not playing in 27 and 28, I think he will still be there in the suite, in the owner's suite, with his family, with his little boys who will be growing up and being teenagers. And who knows, but 5 years down the line, if his 13-year-old son is 18, is he going to be playing?
He ends up playing. Wow.
For Inter Miami? Will he be playing at Miami Freedom Park? Will he come up through the youth academy and be the next Messi star on this team? Who knows? It's a dream, and it's something to look forward to.
Yep, definitely. I mean, it'll be interesting down the road. We'll see where we're all at in 5 years from now, or 5 years after the 2026 season is over, and see where things are with everything by that point. But in a much, much closer future, this team will play Columbus and then get ready to travel to Vancouver. On the next episode of Inside Inter Miami, Michelle and I will be back to talk about how that Columbus game went, plus any other news and happenings with this franchise, with this team. Until then, we thank you for watching Inside Inter Miami. Remember, you can always catch us at MiamiHerald.com and on YouTube. And if you can only listen to us, remember all those podcatchers, all the famous ones have us there too. Until then, thank you for watching and listening. We'll talk to you next week.